Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Faith Abercrombie. Thank you for joining us. The U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in Washington this week is talking about everything from COVID to taxes to economic development, and a session on immigration issues drew attention to two Arizona mayors. Cronkite News reporter Alexia Stanbridge has this story from our Washington bureau.
Both sides of the political aisle agree there's a problem at the border, but two Arizona mayors think the solution may be thousands of miles away in Washington.
There are a lot of kind of common sense immigration reform issues that should have been accomplished years ago.
Mesa Mayor John Giles and Tucson Mayor Regina Romero say they're concerned that immigration reform may be impossible in the current political climate.
We're seeing issues and problems passing the easiest of legislations.
The two were speaking at a U.S. Conference of Mayors panel in Washington on immigration issues, and there were lots of issues to discuss.
Just in the last 3 fiscal years, we've seized increasing amounts of fentanyl and methamphetamines.
Drug trafficking is just one of the problems facing CBP, which last year apprehended a record 1.7 million migrants at the southern border, all against the backdrop of the pandemic. Magnus said it will take cooperation between federal and local agencies to address the many problems.
Our communication with those of you in cities along the border will be key to our success.
And Magnus, who was Tucson's police chief until December when he took over at the CBP, said the feds need to listen to local officials.
It often seemed like discussions of policy in Washington were so abstract and frankly removed from day-to-day realities.
While they're not optimistic, both Romero and Giles think the Biden administration is starting to move in the right direction.
They've always been responsive to the concerns that I've expressed, and I think I'm hopeful that we'll continue to learn from our past failures.
But Giles says Washington has to stop, quote, kicking the can down the road. And Romero agrees that it's past time for Congress to do something.
Now Congress has to act. And so by passing policy that makes sense, not only for families, but economically.
In Washington, Alexia Stanbridge, Cronkite News.
The Mayor's Conference continues today with Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego scheduled to be part of a panel talking about federal investments in workforce development. It wraps up tomorrow with a closing address by President Joe Biden. Democratic Congress member Raul Grijalva has tested positive for COVID. Grijalva posted the news on his Twitter account this morning. He says he has mild symptoms and is in good spirits. He also urged everyone to get their vaccinations and booster shots and to wear an N95 mask. He says, quote, "We all have a role to play to protect our loved ones and the risk of hospitalizations." Efforts to change the Senate filibuster and enact federal voting rights are both dead for now. The filibuster change failed with this 52-48 vote in the Senate last night. Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema shot down the filibuster change, saying it would reduce bipartisanship. But both say they support changes to voting rights. Before the vote, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke about the importance of the voting rights legislation.
This is about the fundamental freedom to vote and what should be an unfettered access to the ballot. The President and I are not going to give up on this issue. This is fundamental to our democracy and it is non-negotiable.
After the vote, Sinema's office released this statement, which reads in part, "Tonight's votes must not be the end of our work to protect our democracy. That goal requires all Americans everywhere to unite around sustained strategies in support of free, fair, and open elections in which every vote is fairly counted. These challenges cannot be solved by one party or Washington alone." The Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University announced today in a press conference that they received a $25 million donation to help give 100 million students around the world access to higher education. Cronkite News reporter Nick Shesky has more.
Francis Najafi immigrated to the United States from Iran around 50 years ago. He credits the Thunderbird School of Global Management for teaching him leadership and business skills that were crucial to his success. Now, he and his wife Diani are giving back to their alma mater with a $25 million donation. The money will be used to make higher education more globally accessible by translating 5 Thunderbird classes.
Translated to 40 different languages, comprising of 90% of the world population, and then further refine it to reflect local cultural attributes to make them even more understandable and make that quality education online accessible at no cost.
Najafi says that the idea of expanding education was one thing, but finding like-minded partners to execute it was another. That is where the Thunderbird School and Arizona State University became a perfect match for Najafi.
These two institutions, independently and certainly together, are magic. And this initiative is an incredible manifestation of the two of us working together.
Cogram says the process is going to be a long rollout that keeps on growing and expanding over time. But the first course in the initiative will be available April 8th. In Phoenix, Nick Shesky, Cronkite News.
The initiative will include courses like customer experience and digital marketing in a global world, available in languages like Thai, Japanese, and Arabic, to name a few. Southern Arizona residents may get to see some spectacular flying in their area. The U.S. Air Force's Thunderbirds will be training in Arizona and New Mexico over the next month. It's all to prepare for the group's 2022 show season. They will head to Fort Huachuca near Tucson in about 2 weeks. After that, the team will train with the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels in California. The training is not yet open to the public. Now, a look back at some of our stories from our sports bureau.
Chinle High School gained notoriety for the Rez Ball documentary Basketball or Nothing, which aired on Netflix. But their basketball season was canceled last year due to COVID-19, which also devastated the Navajo Nation. Abna Saban traveled there to see how they've rebounded.
For almost 2 years, the Chinle High School Wildcat Den sat, waiting for this, and this, and so much of this.
When we lost the whole season last year, we were losing a little bit of our culture. Actually, it wasn't just a little bit. We lost a large part of our culture.
COVID-19 halted basketball, or better referred to as Rez Ball, across the Navajo Nation, while ravishing the reservation. All but 2 Navajo schools canceled winter sports.
That was alarming. That was devastating. That was enormously traumatic to the students, to the staff, to the entire community.
At one point, the Navajo Nation was the pandemic hotspot of the entire country. It was especially heartbreaking for Sean Martin, whose athletic director's office faces a main highway.
And I'm not kidding you, every 20 minutes, an ambulance would be departing. So for me, it was very real.
Loss affected the entire community, including the 2 head coaches. Francine McCurtain lost her father.
We kept our heads up, thinking that was going to come back, and it was heartbreaking.
Raul Mendoza lost his daughter to the virus. Entering his 42nd year of coaching, he has dedicated his life to the game, which often keeps him away from his family. The canceled season allowed more time with loved ones.
After she passed, I thought about, I'm glad that I was able to be with her. And then what if I wasn't there and she passed, and I would always wonder about it, if I could have done this or could have done that.
Vaccination rates on the reservation are on the rise, which means restrictions are starting to lift. Gyms are opening back up, and now the healing begins.
Once they have that ball in their hands, it's something that switches inside of them to do better, to work harder. You could just see the happiness again and that light shine again.
It's easy for us because we, as Native people, are very resilient and have overcome enormous traumas in the past.
Though losing an entire season meant for some leaving the court as an underclassman and returning as seniors.
We love hooping with each other, and 1 year taken it just sucks. But I'm glad it wasn't my senior season.
Kylan Yazzie, son of Francine McCurtain, like many on the reservation, understand how basketball ties a community.
There's a lot of hardships out here on the Navajo Nation that's not seen out in the city. The basketball culture that we have down here as well, it's bigger than people think.
It's almost like family reunions happening every week. So it's just a beautiful celebration of culture through basketball.
That's no better put on display than when other res teams come to town, packing the 7,500 seats at the Den, 1.5 times larger than Chinley's population. While at limited capacity in this scrimmage, the crowd is still energized, eager for that belonging. In the Navajo culture, many things are cyclical. The Sacred Den is one of them.
It's a place of spiritual connection to all living things, and yeah, just getting back to the season is how we move forward.
In Chinle, Omnisapon, Cronkite Sports Report. In 2019, the Arizona Kachinas were formed to expand women's hockey. In 3 years, the organization has made quite an impact. Cronkite News reporter Ryan Blank details their rise in the sport.
The Arizona Kachinas have become the leader in efforts to expand women's hockey across the state. Despite being a young organization, they have made an impact.
I get a lot of why do you do this? Why do you do this? I do it because I want more girls to have the same happy place in hockey that I had as well. It means a lot to be able to provide that home where it's a family.
In just 3 years, the number of teams in the Kachinas organization has nearly tripled.
To go from having 30 girls in the entire state to now we have over 200 in our organization alone. We've built the pipeline from the bottom. We've created a program where we retain everybody at the top, and it's created something really special.
It's honestly really amazing because it's an environment where girls can just play hockey and just be themselves, and you don't have to travel out of state to go play on some big elite team.
Back in 2019, the organization was started to boost participation in the sport. The focus was to give girls a place to play without playing on boys' teams.
The growth of girls hockey is kind of reliant on boys programs getting more girls in the game. There really was no true girls feeder. We had felt that if we created a girls association, that we would get all these girls who are playing hockey in Arizona to come and start playing with us.
Even with the large impact already created, the Kachinas are focused on finding more ways to grow women's hockey. In Mesa, Ryan Blank, Cronkite News.
The NASCAR Championship race at Phoenix was the last competition for the 6th generation NASCAR race car. Cronkite News reporter Jack Johnson tells us how the eyes of the sport look to the next-gen car and the uncertainty it brings.
In February, the next-gen car will make its anticipated debut, and few know what to expect from a car that promises to bring major changes.
We don't know what to expect. I mean, it's going to be a bunch of changes. To me, it's going to be like the car tomorrow, the bigger car change that we've had in years past. So I don't know how we're going to prepare. I'm trusting the team to really kind of guide the ship in the right direction.
When the checkered flag waved at Phoenix Raceway, it did not just symbolize the end of a race, it symbolized the end of an era for NASCAR and its Gen 6 car. Next year, the next gen will make its debut, and NASCAR hopes it can propel this sport into the future. It's a future that NASCAR hopes will revitalize the sport. Empty patches in the grandstands have become a common sight as NASCAR has declined from its popularity peak in the mid-2000s. With this car, NASCAR is swinging for the fences. Lower horsepower, wider tires, numbers pushed forward for more space for sponsors, 5 gears instead of 4, and no more team-built chassis are just a few of the pages of changes. For some fans, there are concerns about how it will race.
But I'm afraid that it's going to be the same over and over and over, and nobody's going to be able to pass anybody.
Recent champ Kyle Larson gathered some first impressions at Charlotte Motor Speedway's road course.
It's got way more grip. Slower top speed, but way better grip, tires, brakes, everything. You can carry a lot more speed in the corners. The slow stuff isn't as slow.
No car was modified more in NASCAR history than the Gen 6. NASCAR hopes that when the next gen debuts, it will be much closer to a finished product. From Avondale, Jack Johnson, Cronkite News.
The new generation NASCAR build is expected to compete for points when the season kicks off in February 2022 at the Daytona 500.
The 6th NBC Premier League morning live show made its return recently, making it the first West Coast showing ever. Cronkite News reporter Taiwo Adeshikbin in our LA bureau has more on how the live event brought soccer fans together.
Early morning rain didn't stop soccer fans traveling from near and far to attend the Premier League morning live show.
From Atlanta to come here, and it definitely works. This is a success.
When you have an event like this, you get all 20 fan bases together for whether it be 4 hours or 2 days. And I've had conversations with plenty of amazing people, plenty of friendly places, that I've never met before, and I'll probably never see again. But it's just for those 4 hours, you're brought together by that common look.
Fans posed for photos with the championship trophy and other displays lending their team support. And that excitement was also felt during the matches.
Apart from anything else, in the UK, every club's fans are so divided. So you would never get Manchester United fans and Liverpool fans side by side at an event, ever. So then to see them happily side by side at an event like this, I think it just gives everybody around the world a real sense that football is the thing that brings us together, whoever we support.
One fan who grew up in the UK has attended these live footy matches and says Americans bring a different level of passion.
The American fans really get into the atmosphere and the game and the flow of the game and the energy of the game.
Up the Foxes forever!
In Los Angeles, Taiwo Adeshikbin, Cronkite News.
Well, that's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for Break It Down. That's next. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
I was so excited when I learned that I was going to be the next moderator of Washington Week. I was incredibly lucky to be mentored by Gwen Ifill, and what that gave to me was this confidence that I could be my full self and that I was deserving of whatever spaces I was in.
Welcome to Washington Week.
I also feel this great joy in taking the helm of Washington Week, knowing that I can mold it and make it my own, but also make sure that it is still within the legacy and the tradition that made it so great for all of these years.
We've heard a lot about this term physician burnout. One thing that we do know is physician burnout not only affects physicians, but also healthcare systems, colleagues, and importantly, patients. Last year, a Medscape poll said around 42% of all physicians were burnt out, and this was before the pandemic. Dr. Sonal Harder, break it down and help me understand what is going on here. Let's start. What is physician burnout?
Swapna, thank you for having me here today. And I have looked at this for the last 10 years of my career. And I know exactly what the Medscape statistics you're talking about. But here's the thing. Physician burnout existed, and it was rampant, and it was a serious problem even before the pandemic. We are talking about it now because the pandemic kind of, broke the camel's back. It came to the limelight because of the nature of the pandemic. But those numbers are true. And over 50% doctors have consistently reported burnout for the last decade. Those are not the new statistics. But during the pandemic, about 72% healthcare workers now report burnout due to the pandemic. And these include your doctors, your nurses, your PAs, everybody who works in healthcare. So burnout is a disease, and more than that, the astounding number of doctors who actually die by suicide, that's about 300 to 400 per year. So you can imagine how serious this problem is.
Wow. And those stats are staggering. I don't think most of us are really aware of the impact of sort of the stresses around the healthcare system, and then especially what's happened with COVID around physicians. So when we say burnout, are we talking about being tired? What are we talking about exactly?
So basically, burnout in medicine is defined it's categorized in 3 aspects. So one is emotional exhaustion. This is something you just don't have anything to offer. You're so emotionally exhausted that you have nothing to offer to your patients or people around you at work. Number 2 is depersonalization. And this is something so obvious when I work with my colleagues or my learners. This is where you stop connecting with your patients as humans. Basically, your patients are your numbers. They're number 1 or number 2 in the exam rooms. And number 3 is lack of efficacy, where your work starts to get affected. And this is where the third, element of this is where oftentimes doctors start to get in trouble, because this is where the medical errors start to happen. So those are basically 3 big components of physician burnout.
Okay, so really helpful to better understand there. And I know that this is multifactorial. The causes, I'm guessing, there's many reasons. But if you had to really break down what the primary reasons for physician burnout are, what are they?
So the 3 main aspects that affect physician well-being, number 1 being culture of medicine, number 2, system that you work, and number 3, the environment that you work, at your hospital. So the culture of medicine, has always been looked as a very toxic culture, because this is where you have this sense of superhero mentality, where you feel like you have to be there and you have to take care of all and everything. There's a people-pleasing aspect to this. We want people to like us. We want our patients to like us. We want my staff to like us, right? So that kind of people-pleasing mentality. The idea of perfectionism, which we know doesn't exist, but is expected out of doctors and healthcare workers. Do it all. So instead of delegating work, doing it all, not saying no or not putting boundaries. So those are the traditional cultural things that we have noticed in medicine. I'm happy to say that those things are changing, because there's so much talk and awareness amongst the newer generation that those things have changed. There are some work hour policies that have helped doctors kind of limit themselves and have some boundaries. But the other 2 big domains are system. Our system has changed. Our system now is driven by metrics and money and reimbursements, which I think behind closed doors, a lot of patients are unaware that when a physician is unable to prescribe a certain medication or order a test that they need, it is not necessarily due to just one factor, but that could be a lot of stakeholders like insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, or overall the economy of it. But the physician kind of bears the brunt of not able to provide a certain service. EHR, which was supposed to be helping doctors, actually is not necessarily doing what it's supposed to do. If you spend an hour interacting with a patient, the physician is spending about a couple of hours on the same patient behind the computer trying to sort out notes and the electronic orders and etc. All those things. The system really does not work in favor of healthcare providers. And number 3 is the environment you work in. Who is your leader? What are your values? Are they aligned with your own personal values? Do you have adequate staffing? Do you have a good EHR that actually supports you and helps you get through your day on a timely basis? So those are basically 3 domains that affect physician burnout.
So lots of topics there that I don't think as patients and as consumers of healthcare we're frankly aware of. But as we hear it, starting to kind of make sense. And we know that some physicians seem to be disproportionately impacted by this issue. So I think we're talking about women, and I think we're talking about sort of mid-career docs. So can you just kind of quickly explain what is going on there?
So women, we know that have higher burnout than men do, and about 20 to 60% higher in women than compared to men. But 70% women doctors report gender discrimination as one of the reasons that could be causing some burnout. There's also a lot of work-life balance that affects female physicians more than male physicians. When you look at the pay scale, women are consistently paid less than their counterpart. And when it comes to promotions, also, women get more affected despite having the same qualifications. When you look at the suicide rate, female physicians have higher suicide rates, twice more than general population. So do men, but female physicians seem to be affected by that statistic a lot more than general population, which is disheartening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really disturbing to see that a lot of the gender equity issues that we see in so many other professions and in our larger society existing in medicine as well. Dr. Sonal Harder, thank you so much for breaking this complex topic down. We know that we cannot even think about where we would be in this pandemic without the incredible work of physicians on the front lines and throughout this sort of, long haul that we have all been in and we seem to be continuing going in. So thank you so much for your service to the community and also on this topic.
Thank you so much for having me today, Swapna.
This hour of local news is made possible by contributions from the Friends of PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you. If you have comments about Arizona PBS News, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Thank you.